Hello ladies and gentlemen of YouTube and welcome to another edition of my videos. Today I wanted to show you an analysis from a recent classical game that I played online. What I've been trying to do during this COVID-19 crisis is play at least one classical game per day and do some analysis with it. I thought whilst we've got all this free time available, we should use it as wisely as I can, and for myself I've been trying to do as much chess as I possibly can. So what I present to you today is a game that I played on chess.com, and one of the advantages that I have against other people is I have something known as a squared off board at home, and this means I can play squared off. I can play on a real board online against the players from around the world, and what this means for me is I get some proper on the board experience versus playing on a computer screen, which is helpful for me because it means I can transfer hopefully those skills on the board. I would say play a lot better over the boards than I do online. My online grade compared to my in real life grade is atrocious, so if I can play on the board as much as I can, it's perfect for me. Right, so this game, it was a 30-minute game, and one of the things I would say, as I say, is a big advantage being able to play over the board with squared off, but one of the big disadvantages of it is the time controls that you can choose on them are quite limited. And what I mean by that is, although I can do a 30-minute game, I can't add any sort of increments onto it. The next one up I can either do a 15-minute plus 10 seconds, which to me is a little bit too fast. And the next one up is 45 minutes plus 45 seconds, which is far too much time to play just a normal rated game. I'd rather do it if I was playing it in like a lead chess 45-45 thing, which I'm doing tomorrow. I'd much rather do that and invest that time than be able to do over the board. It'll just take too long. I don't really sat there for two to 3 hours against an invisible opponent, if I'm being honest with you. But as I say, so with 30 minutes it can be a bit of a problem because I've had positions where I might be winning but I can't play the game fast enough over the board, and I've ended up actually losing or running out of time as a result. But what I found out in this particular game, when I started to get very low on time, I can actually switch over to my computer and quickly boot up the live chess to then finish off the rest of the game. So let's go into the position. So as the title suggests, we had an exchange variation. Now exchange variation has a pretty terrible reputation. As you can see, one of the big downsides of it is that there isn't really any imbalance in the position. You'll see that the pawn structure is totally symmetrical, which makes it a little bit difficult for players to really try and create play. Often, unfortunately, when you put it through in Grandmaster games, there's a high draw percentage. Even at club level, there's a high draw percentage. But it's a very easy position to play as white and also black. So that's the advantage of it. And I quite like playing it, even though it has this terrible reputation. I struggle with it as black when I play the French. So, you know, I think playing it as white, you should always play something that you struggle with when you're playing as black. So playing as white, I can see, you know, my opponents often will try and push to try and create an imbalance, and unfortunately that creates a bit of an unstable position that I'm able to then win it out. So we did bishop d3. So I'm just trying to stop the bishop from coming to this particular square. It's quite a good setup, getting the bishops out. Bishop d6, not overly common. This one, oops, let me just move this up a little bit. I was hoping I had my my opening book on here, but it doesn't look like I have it, but that's fine. We will play on as a result. Okay, so have I got the board screen up on here? Apologies for this, guys. Yes, okay. Right, so bishop d6, there was a capture, knight to e2, bishop to g4, and I played f3 in this situation. Yeah, this has been reached a few times in some positions. Bishop h5, and I castled. He castled as well. One other way that I could play this position if I wanted to is go into c3, move the queen over there. I could then push c3, maybe get the queen over, and then maybe castle long or something. This is also an idea because I've got this ready-made attack with g4, h4, but again, I'm not really interested in trying to create huge imbalances here. I just want a playable position going into the middle game, which I tried to do in this game. So there's castles, and then c3 was played, so just supporting the d4 pawn. Knight b to d7, rook to e1, rook a to e8. I then play queen to c2, and I sort of miss this move, rook to e3. It turns out it's probably not that good at all, really, but at the time I didn't really like the fact that there's this rook just sat right in my position. It's a bit of a pain for me. So I had an idea of trying to get the knight to reroute and hit this rook, pushing it away. You'll see actually that this knight's well defended. I mean, he's got enough support here to hold here, and you know, the king can also come in if need be. Although bear in mind this queen is eyeing that h2 square, but you'll notice that this rook hasn't really got any good squares it can go to. It could go back to here, so if I manage to push it out, black just loses a tempo, is what I'm trying to say. So perhaps I shouldn't have been too concerned about the rook coming to e3 here. But in any case, I played knight to d2. Better was probably playing queen to d2, forcing the rook to come over. And then ideas of the knight coming to a3, followed by knight to c2, probably would have been a little bit more interesting. But I think actually with it coming to this square, I'm not too sure on the scope of it. Maybe coming back out to here to target this pawn. There's potential ideas there. But I didn't play that in the end. I decided to move the knight to d2. The rook came to f to e8 and knight to f1. So I'm now hitting this rook, and I've also got another little threat here of rerouting this knight to g3. So the rook moves back, I move to g3, and bishop came to g6. So I'm sort of forced to exchange here, and I guess this gives me some play here, because now we've got a tiny imbalance here, a static weakness of these double pawns. I was quite surprised he didn't take this way. As we'll find later in the position, taking this way creates a few problems for black, mainly just this open light square weakness on this king. So I was a little bit surprised to see it this way, but this is what happened in the game. I brought my queen to d2 now. I couldn't really... Unfortunately, in this position, there's not a whole lot going on. So I had an idea of trying to maybe swap off the rooks and maybe bring my knight over to f4 and maybe do some stuff along here. But I didn't really have too much of a plan going here. I think my main concern was trying to get rid of these rooks and maybe reclaim this file. That was my main plan. And you know, just have a normal position. I know I can always count if everything swaps off. I've got a little weakness here that I could potentially play on, and hopefully I can try and create another weakness in this position. c5 was played, and this is a real pain for me. The problem is if I capture straight away, there is this check that comes straight in. And whilst it's not the end of the world, it just means my king has to kind of get really tucked, and it's going to be away from the game for quite some time. So it's going to be, I guess it's not so bad looking at it now, but there are some potential problems along this square. I mean, maybe he's got ideas of going queen to e3 here now. Just being a bit of a nuisance more than anything. I think I'd have to be forced to swap off here. I'm not sure I like the look at this position. I think it's going to be very difficult to get my knight into play. Maybe I run the king back. So even actually coming to f1 might not be such a bad idea. Although it just brings my king a little bit closer to the peril, but at least it defends everything this way. So perhaps maybe not as bad as I thought. The challenge here for black is he's now got this isolated pawn. So we've got these double pawns here and this isolated pawn. We now have our two potential weaknesses that we can play on. Typically when we go into an endgame, it's important to have two weaknesses to fight on. We call this the theory of two weaknesses, as it allows us to go between those two different static weaknesses and hopefully win an endgame as a result. So in any case, in the actual game, I did still capture here, and I think I'm not really too happy with this move, knight to d4. The problem now is my knight is now pinned, and it's a little bit, it creates a few problems for me in this game, as you're about to find out. I couldn't really see a good way for him to exploit this pin at this present time, but it just means at some point I'm going to have to move this king out of the way just to get out of the pin. Knight to b6 was played. Again, this had a really annoying threat for me, as it meant now he was going to be jumping into this lovely c4 square. I took off some of the rooks. I then played queen to f4, and I wanted to try and create some little bit of counterplay along his king here, just be a bit of a nuisance with my queen. Knight came to c4. I threw in a check. King to f7. He doesn't want to play a move like I think that I just take his pawn here, and I think I'm doing quite fine. I'm now defending this b2 pawn. So that didn't happen in the game. King to f7 I think is much better. And this is I think a bit of a blunder, or it's probably my biggest mistake in the game. The problem now I've got is I've now created a backwards pawn on c3, and it becomes quite difficult to defend this position. Thankfully here he plays knights to a3, but going back, I think if he went back to d6, this I think is much better for him. If I come over here, he's now got this permanent weakness here. I think he could do something like, let's say if he just pushes b5 potentially. That looks pretty dangerous. And just pushing this forward. If I ever move this knight falls, I think I'd have to do a move like b4 here. In which case, let's see now, if I came back, or could I come forward maybe? Maybe it's not as clear as I thought, maybe b5 isn't that accurate. So let's see, I think actually if I went instead of c1, if I just did that, oh he just takes the pawn, doesn't he? So that doesn't work, so I'd have to do that. Maybe just a move like this looks pretty good. He comes forward, shuffles back. I mean, this is still a weakness that I have to deal with. There's potential ideas of rook coming here as well, exploiting that pin. It doesn't look like a particularly nice position for black, so I was quite happy to see the move that was played, knight to a3. Rook to c1, he then did knight to b5. And I fought for quite a long time here. The challenge I've got here is this pawn is now being attacked twice, and this knight is in, just once this pawn goes, this knight's in a very precarious situation. There's also just a simple threat of just capturing here as well, after pawn captures, taking the rook. So I managed to find this move, which was b4, and that manages to hold everything together. He did queen to c4. Now, so still maintaining potential threat here. Notice he can't just take here because we'll just take his queen, so that's why he did queen to c4. I took off, and I decided to make a decision. I thought I'll just take this pawn now. I'm up a pawn now, but it's a very, very difficult situation here now. I was quite surprised by his next move, but actually it kind of makes a lot of sense. He played queen to e8. Interesting move now. He's now threatening just to come down here and throw a really nasty check. If I do nothing about it, let's say I just go here, it's going to be lights out very, very quickly. Oh, the queen defends it though. Oh, maybe it's not as close as I thought actually. Oh, if after that, then you just capture here. So, even if he captures this, he comes in with a very, very nasty check. The knight will just about hold it. But I think probably black is doing alright here. Much better than what was played. Let's see, you can take this pawn. I do take that, so maybe it's not as good as I thought it was then in that case. So maybe something like this. I'm not sure. The problem I've got is the problem for black is as soon as he moves this rook, this pawn falls. So he's got to always contend with that. Any case, so I decided to move my king up forward to sort of defend against a few of these squares. Notice this knight's beauty defends here, this queen defends this square, and this rook defends here. So I'm not really too worried about anything black does here. Knight came to h5. I thought, great, I'll take off this. He throws the check in first. And here I had a decision of coming to either g3 or retreating back to any of these squares. I decided against this move just simply because there is this nasty check here. Although I can move the knight back, but I think actually after a move like g5, I think black is doing alright here. Although there's this interesting bit of counterplay here, so maybe it's not as clear as I thought it was. What would I do with this knight king? Maybe I move him forward. Have I got any useful checks here? I could maybe come here. I could come over here maybe. I think I could just make this king's life in living hell by just throwing in a lot of checks. And I think here, yes, to then swap off the queen. So again, maybe it was all right actually to do that move. Potentially, I just wonder if there's any other useful checks here for black. I think he can just take off the knight there now, can't he? And I think black, although I'm going to get this little bit of counterplay, this king is in a very precarious situation. I mean, just simple threats of just playing g5 followed by queen to h4 is just enough to make me wince a little bit. So as a result, I moved my king to f1. I think that was a better square for it to go to. And there was then the capture here. I then took on b7, king came to f8, captured on d5 as well. I was a bit surprised to not see any sort of block here, so I was quite happy to take off all these pawns. Queen came to e3, and I thought I found basically a winning move, which was queen to c5, and I was thinking at this point, oh, my opponent is going to resign very, very soon here, as I can now trade off queens. In actual fact, this endgame is not as easy as I thought it was going to be. I don't know really if there's anything better that I could have played. The challenge I've got is there's a lot of little threats here. He's now threatening just to come to f2. I'm not sure if there's anything really any better. Perhaps I could just come through the queen here just to stop that threat. It looks a little bit safer. But again, with black keeping the queens on, it just creates a little bit of complications for me. I think actually this is probably the strongest human-looking move I would say here. So there was a queen captures, and then rook took on a2. So we have a very interesting position here. You'll notice that I've got these double pawns here, but black has also got some double pawns along here. So I'm up 2 pawns, but these pawns aren't particularly good, and I have a very difficult time in trying to hold on to this position. So the first thing I did, I played rook to e1. I had the idea of just coming to e2 and just try and push this rook off. He came to a4. He's going to come straight to c2. Just another thing I forgot to mention with playing rook to e1. I'm also blocking the king from access to this position just for the time being. I played king to e2. He did rook to c4. I did king to d3, and he captured this rook. Now it's interesting, at this point I was quite low on time. I was down to about the last 4 minutes. My opponent had about 24 minutes. He had a very, very comfortable time advantage over me. So because of that, I had to switch over to the computer and I lost about a couple minutes there. So I'm now playing with about 3 minutes left in this endgame. It's not that easy, this endgame. It's easy on the one hand because black has actually not got brilliant pawn structure here. I've got a pass pawn, but it's only 1 pawn ahead, and normally black can hold these positions, but because he's got this other weakness here, I should be able to win this. I just have to manage to keep pushing this pawn somehow, not lose too many of my pawns, and I should be okay. King came to d4. He rushed back to c7. I moved the rook up to e5. Rook to a7. And I took here on h5. He played h6, which I didn't really think made a whole lot of sense, to be honest with you. And I think I played a little bit of a mistake here. I played rook to d5. And I think actually this just allows a2 straight away, so I'm going to lose a pawn here, which, it was great that I've managed to nab this really weak pawn over here, but in actual fact, not so good after all. Just some other things to consider as well. I was a little bit confused with the decision not to play g6. Again, just a simple logical move just to hold on to these pawns. Maybe he was just worried about my potential play along here. He just thought just to get rid of the pawn, but it just seemed a little bit strange to me. Anyway, I did king to c5. He did rook to a2. I just thought I'll get rid of my h-pawn, probably the weakest of the 3 pawns. He took here. I did king to c6. So I want to keep pushing my king along and push this and get into what's known as a Lucena position. I can achieve that quite easily, hopefully, in this particular game. He then moved his rook to e2, so threatening to come over here. I did c4, rook to e6, move back with my king, king to e7, rook to f5, g6 was played. There was a lot of manoeuvring in this game, but I slowly pushed forward. I don't think I played this too badly, to be honest with you. So I've got this nice progress going on here. I'm not making too many bad moves here. Rook to c4 I think is a nice move. I'm now going to be coming back to c3 to protect this pawn. f1 was played. And I did c3. Here, I think black has an interesting continuation here that I was surprised he didn't play. He could actually play h5 here and just create a little bit of problems for me. If I captured this, now black's got his own passed pawn. So it's not so easy for me. If I push here, he pushes. And potentially this could be very interesting, this position. I'm not too sure if I would have to give up this pawn here. Potentially I'd have to. Maybe I'll do this. Takes. Ooh, okay, that's a drawn position, so very interesting play here. I mean, maybe I can just keep pushing. Yeah, I can just keep pushing that actually. So he has to do something about this pawn now. So maybe he can come scooting around. Maybe stop it this way and then come here. So maybe it's not as good as I thought it was actually. But in any case, there is some. I think there's some counterplay here with h5 that I think is worth also noting. I came to c6. I'm almost getting to this all-important 7th rank. Rook came to b1, king to c7, rook to a1, c6 was played, rook to b1, c8, king to d6. I did c7, and here he played rook to f1, and after king to d8 he resigned. There's not really a whole lot more he can do here. If he wanted to try and play for a little bit of shenanigans, maybe do rook to b4. But after king to d8, he hasn't got any move to stop this now. So it's a very, very difficult position to play here. I'm just going to keep pushing this pawn until I win, essentially. Okay, so that was the game. Very, very, I think instructive endgame in the end. But yeah, I think it was definitely interesting. I think I want to try and do a bit more computer analysis with this. I mean, I can maybe just request this now. Let's just have a look at the position. Just see where we were at on here. And just see where we got in this position. I don't think it's going to work properly, this. For some reason I've got the computer analysis turned off. Let's just see. Nope, it's not letting me do it. But any case, I hope you enjoyed this video, guys. Tomorrow I've got a 45-45 chess. Hopefully I do well in that. Wish me luck, and I'll speak to you guys soon. Cheers, bye.